right, so we're looking at errors of transposition. These are the same like errors of original entry. The only difference here is that when you get the difference of the correct amount and the wrong amount, that difference is always going to be divisible by 9. All right. So what happens in errors of transposition? Numbers are mixed up. All right. The numbers are mixed up. So you might see an overstatement or you might see an understatement, as we saw in errors of original entry. Okay. So let us look at them. Here's the first example. All right. Purchase returns to J Limited for 16,000 were recorded as 61,000. All right. So here the numbers have been mixed up. 16 and 61,000. All right. So just like how we did with errors of original entry, all right, we're going to have to subtract these two amounts and we have to correct the error. So this is how we're going to do it, right? So here, purchase returns, also called return outwards. This is whenever we're returning goods to our suppliers, all right? So also remember, purchase returns, this is a contra expense account, all right? As we can see here in the table of double entry, with expenses, an increase, you debit. But with a contra expense, an increase, you credit. All right. As I say, the contra is just the opposite. All right. So return outwards is a contra expense account. All right. Then we're returning these goods back to our supplier. All right. Who is a payable. We're owing them money. All right. Obviously, we got these goods on credit. All right. Now we've returned some of them. So as we return some of the goods, the amount we're owing our supplier or payable reduces. All right. And remember, a payable is a liability. All right. Payable is a liability. So a decrease in a liability, you debit. All right. Because we're returning goods to someone who are owing money. So the money which we are owing them is going to reduce since we have returned some goods. That's why our liability is decreasing. All right. So here's the journal entry. Okay. The error, the one with the mixed up number. So we're going to debit our payable, which is J Limited. Right. This is our payable, is a liability. Debit. So here it was recorded as 61,000, right? Purchase returns, which is also called return outwards, which is a contra expense account. Going to credit it, return outwards 61,000. Right? So this is the error that has been made. So it's supposed to be 16,000, but it was recorded as 61,000. So as I said, just like in errors of original entries, all right, we are going to get the difference from the correct amount and the wrong amount. So we say 61,000 minus 16,000. We get 45,000, all right? So let's say the only difference between an error of transposition and an error of original entry is that our difference is always going to be divisible by 9, all right? So the same way we're treating errors of original entry is the same way we're treating these errors of transposition, all right? In this case, this is an error of transposition and it was overstated, all right? the numbers were mixed up and it was overstated, right? Instead of recording 16,000, we recorded 61,000. All right. So what we're supposed to do is now we have to decrease both these accounts by 45,000 so that we remain with the correct amount. All right. So let me just bring the T accounts. And so our error of transposition was overstated. Let me get some T accounts here. So we have our payable here, J Limited. This is a liability account. Here we have return outwards. Return outwards, our contra expense account. Okay, contra expense account. So we debited here 61,000. Right, so here we have to reduce each account. All right, we have to reduce each account. All right, so since we have an overstatement of 61,000 on our debit side, we're going to credit J Limited 45,000. Right, J Limited 45,000. And since we have an overstatement on our return outwards, right, we're going to have to debit that we can reduce this amount. So when you subtract 61,000 from 45,000, you're going to remain with 16,000, which is the original amount you were supposed to have. Right? The general entry to fix this error of transposition is we're going to debit J Limited. We're going to credit J Limited 45,000 and we'll debit return outwards 45,000. Debit return outwards 45 and J Limited credit 45,000. Yes. All right. So we have cleared this error of transposition. Any questions before I go to the next one? Okay. The next one we have a sales return of 3,500 from team were recorded as 5,300. All right. So what I just forgot to do in question one is we identify this transaction. All right. We identify this transaction. This is a sales returns. All right. This is a sales returns, or what we call return inwards. Okay, return inwards. All right. We now identify the accounts involved. All right, let's identify the accounts involved here. So we have the sales return account or the return inwards account, and we're going to have our receivable account. All right, our receivable account. This is Tim. All right, so we made a credit sale to Tim. Tim is owing us money. All right. Now Tim has brought back some goods that he bought from us. All right. So Whenever someone who's owing you money brings back goods, that's a receivable. A receivable is an asset, all right? And a decrease in an asset is credited. So team is supposed to be credited, all right? Then return inwards is a contra revenue account. All right, so let's look here. For a revenue account, an increase in a revenue account, you credit. All right, an increase in a revenue account, you credit. But an increase in a contra revenue account, you debit. All right. So a contra revenue is just the opposite of a revenue account. How you treat a revenue account? You treat it a contra revenue in the opposite way. All right. So let's put the transposed journal entry. All right. Return inwards a contra revenue account. We debit. So it was recorded as 5,300 instead of 3,500. All right. So the numbers have been mixed, and again we see another overstatement. Right? As I said, an error of transposition is treated the same way as an error of original entry. The only difference is whenever you subtract the wrong amount from the correct amount, that number will be divisible by 9. That's how you know it's an error of transposition. So return inwards, the transposed amount, which is even overstated, is 5,300. All right. And team, who is our receivable, all right. Reduction in a receivable is an asset. Reduction in an asset, you credit, right? So credit team 5,300. So this is the error that was made, right? We have to correct it. So again, what we're going to do, we subtract the correct amount, 300 minus 3,500. Right, it's here, 5,300 minus 2,500, we get 1,800, right? 1,800 is divisible by 9. So you know, okay, this is an error of transposition, all right? 1,000. So our entries have been overstated by 1,800, right? So we're going to need to reduce both of these entries by 1,800 to get our correct amount, 3,500. Right? So let's look at it in terms of the tier counts. Right? We have return inwards. Inwards contra revenue account. And we have team, who is our receivable. Right? Team, who is our receivable. So we overstated the amount here by 5,300. Let's read this. Right? 5,300 here. On Team's account, it was also 5,300. Excuse me. So these are the overstated amounts. We need to reduce them. So what we're going to do is we're going to credit return outwards 1,800. Okay. Credit return outwards 1,800, and we debit team also 1,800. emitting 1000, so that we get our correct amount. So 5,300 minus 1,800, you get 3,500, right? Then here you get 3,500. How we fix this error, right? We debit team 1,800 and we credit return inwards. Return on inwards 1,800, right? And on your narration is saying being a correction of a transposition error, right? Being the correction of a transposition error, right? Should have also put that here on top here, being the correction of a transposition error of that has been overstated. Error that has been overstated. Yes. Any queries? Okay, let's look at another example. All right. Now, in this case here, our errors are going to be understated. All right, they're going to be understated. The first two examples, the transposition errors were overstated. In the next examples, the transposition errors are going to be understated, like this. Example 3, depreciation expense of 2,100 was recorded as 1,200. All right. Depreciation is an expense. The journal entry for depreciation is you debit depreciation expense. Remember here, expenses increase, you debit. So depreciation expense, debit. I'm going to debit here 2,100 of the 1,200, the understated amount, and you credit accumulated depreciation. Right. This is the journal entry for depreciation. You debit depreciation expense and you credit accumulated depreciation. 1,200 here. So we've seen that this amount has been undercast, right? It's supposed to be 2,100. The bookkeeper transposed, right? Instead of putting 2,100, he puts 1,200. So we have to correct this error, right? So we're going to get the difference between the correct amount, 2,100 minus 1,200. $900. As we can see, 900 is divisible by 9, so we are sure that this is an error of transposition. All right, so we need to increase both of these accounts by 900. All right, so to fix this error, all right, we get our tables here and put it here. Let's say whoa, where are the tables? Let me just copy it again. Let me try that again. Okay. So we're going to put depreciation expense. Put depreciation expense there. And accumulated depreciation here. Depreciation. Right, remember depreciation expense, it's an expense. Accumulated depreciation is a contra asset account, okay? Accumulated depreciation, contra asset account, right? And if we go to the rules of general, I think double entry, assets increase with debit. So a contra asset is going to increase with credit, okay? Accumulated depreciation, this is a contra asset. So we were undercasted, wrote 1,200 here. So here 1,200. Get rid of these amounts here. Right. So we need to increase these amounts in our accounts so that we get 2,100. All right. So we are going to debit depreciation expense 900. All right, so that it can increase with debit depreciation expense 900, so that it can increase to 2,100. And accumulated depreciation, we also will credit it 900, so that we can have 2,100 on our debit side, and we can also have 2,100 on our credit side once we have done the corrections. All right. So how we fixed this error? So this was understated, undercast. So we're going to debit depreciation expense. $900, and we're to credit accumulated depreciation. 900. All right. Let's remember the rules of double entry. Expenses increase. All right. An increase, you debit. We had a contra asset, so it's opposite of an asset account. So an increase in the contra asset is credited, and a decrease in the contra asset is debited. All right. So when you just hear contra, just know the rules are opposite. All right. Let's look at our final example. Okay. We have a contra settlement error of, it's not a, it should be contra settlement of 3,200. Contra settlement 3,200 was recorded as 2,300. All right. So a contra settlement, this is a situation where you have a receivable and a payable. All right. Each of them are owing each other money. Let's say, for example, we have two people. X and Y, all right? X owes Y 5,000 and Y owes X 7,000, right? Now, instead of Y paying X 7,000, instead of X paying Y a 5,000, all right, and then Y giving back X 7,000, we can just erase this 5,000 from both people, all right, so that Y is no longer owing X 7,000, you just be owing a 2,000, and X is no longer owing Y 5,000, right? So we'll just say here 2,000. Instead of paying a 5,000, then the other one gives you back a 7,000, all right? You can just cancel out the 5,000 and you just pay the 2,000, and then the Ngongole has finished. So usually in a contra settlement, both the receivable and the payable are reducing. A receivable is an asset. A reduction in an asset is credited. All right, so the receivable credit the receivable, and the liability, the payable is a liability. A decrease in the payable, you debit. All right, so your payable be debited, your receivable be credited. That's how you do a contra settlement. Now, in this case, the contra settlement was supposed to be 3,200, but it was recorded as 2,300, meaning it has been undercast. Right? It has been undercast. All right. So we're going to say by how much? Say 3,200 minus 2,300. That is 900. How much been undercast or understated? So meaning we're going to have to debit the payable in 900 and credit the receivable in 900. All right. So let's look at it in form of T accounts. So we're going to, so here we have 2,300 for our payable. Let me just put here. Payable, and then here our receivable. So here it's been undercast by 2,300. Receivable also has been undercast 2,300. So we'll need to debit our payable 900 and our receivable we have to credit 900. Right? So that we have our correct amount, which is 3,200. So we have fixed the error. All right. So we are going to say on your journal entry, we're going to debit the payable 900. 900. We need the receivable 900. Okay, so it's a being the correction of an understated transposed error. And you are done.